स्वयं व्यासेनाकृतितं पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवाद्वेषिणी। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णा प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमया प्रदीपः। प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धामोपलनन्दनः पार्थो वत्स सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। भीष्माद्रोणततश्च यत्र चला गन्धर्वनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला। अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैर्नदी कैवर्तका केशवा। पाराशर्यवचत्सरोचममलं गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटम् नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथ सम्बोधनाबोधितम्। लोके सज्जन शतपदैरहरः पीयमानं मुदा भूयात् भारत पङ्कजं कलिमल प्रध्वंसिना श्रेयसे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिम् यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम्। यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्त्यं सामगाः। ध्यानावस्थिततत्कतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणा। देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
ॐ श्री परमात्मने नमः। अतः पंचमोऽध्यायः कर्म संन्यासयोगः। अर्जुन सन्न्यासं कर्मणां कृष्ण पुनर्योगं च शंससि यच्छ्रेययेतयोरेकम् तन्मे ब्रूहि सुनिश्चितम् श्रीभगवानुवाच सन्न्यासः कर्मयोगश्च निःश्रेयसकरावुभौ तयोस्तु कर्मसन्न्यासात् कर्मयोगो विशिष्यते येयः स नित्यसन्न्यासी यो न द्वेष्टि न काङ्क्षति निर्द्वन्द्वो हि महाबाहो सुखं बन्धात् प्रमुच्यते सांख्ययोगो पृथक् बालाः प्रवदन्ति न पण्डिताः एकमप्यास्थितः सम्यग् उभयोर्विन्दते फलम् यत्साङ्ख्यै प्राप्यते स्थानम् तद्योगैरपि गम्यते एकं साङ्ख्यं च योगं च यः पश्यति स पश्यति सन्न्यासस्तु महाबाहो दुःखमाप्तुमयोगतः योगयुक्तो मुनिर्ब्रह्म न चिरेणाधिगच्छति योगयुक्तो विशुद्धात्मा विजितात्मा जितेन्द्रियः सर्वभूतात्मा भूतात्मा कुर्वन्नपि न लिप्यते नैव किञ्चित् करोमीति युक्तो मन्येत तत्त्ववित् पश्यन् शृण्वन् स्पृशन् जिघ्रन् अश्नन् गच्छन् स्वपन् श्वसन् प्रलपन् विसृजन् गृह्णन् उन्मिषन् निमिषन्नपि इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेषु वर्तन्त इति धारयन् ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यते न स पापेन पद्मपत्रमिवाम्भसा कायेन मनसा बुद्ध्या केवलैरिन्द्रियैरपि योगिनः कर्म कुर्वन्ति सङ्गं त्यक्त्वात्मशुद्धये युक्तः कर्म परं त्यक्त्वा शान्तिमाप्नोति नैष्ठिकीम् अयुक्तः कामकारेण फले सक्तो निबध्यते सर्वकर्माणि मनसा सन्न्यस्यास्ते सुखं वशी नवद्वारे पुरे देहि नैव कुर्वन्न कारयन् न कर्तृत्वं न कर्माणि लोकस्य सृजति प्रभुः न कर्मफलसंयोगम् स्वभावस्तु प्रवर्तते नादत्ते कस्यचित् पापम् न चैव सुकृतं विभुः अज्ञानेनावृतं ज्ञानम् तेन मुह्यन्ति जन्तवः ज्ञानेन तु तदज्ञानम् येषां नाशितमात्मनः तेषामादित्यवज्ञानम् प्रकाशयति तत्परम् तद्बुद्धयस्तदात्मानः तन्निष्ठास्तत्परायणाः गच्छन्त्य पुनरावृत्तिम् ज्ञाननिर्धूतकल्मषाः विद्या विनय सम्पन्ने ब्राह्मणे गविहस्तिनि शुनि चैव स्वपाके च पण्डिता समदर्शिनः इहैव तैर्जितः सर्गः येषां साम्ये स्थितं मनः निर्दोषं हि समं ब्रह्म तस्माद् ब्रह्मणि ते स्थिताः न प्रहृष्येत् प्रियं प्राप्य नोद्विजेत् प्राप्य चाप्रियम् स्थिरबुद्धिरसम्मूढः ब्रह्मविद् ब्रह्मणि स्थितः बाह्यस्पर्शेष्वसक्तात्मा विन्दत्यात्मनि यत्सुखम् स ब्रह्मयोगयुक्तात्मा सुखमक्षयमश्नुते ये हि संस्पर्शजा भोगाः दुःखयोनय एव ते आद्यन्तवन्तः कौन्तेय न तेषु रमते बुधः शक्नोति हैव यः सोढुम् प्राक्शरीरविमोक्षणात् कामक्रोधोद्भवम् वेगम् स युक्तः स सुखी नरः योऽन्तः सुखोऽन्तरारामः तथान्तर्ज्योतिरेव यः स योगी ब्रह्मनिर्वाणम् ब्रह्मभूतोऽधिगच्छति लभन्ते ब्रह्मनिर्वाणम् ऋषयः क्षीणकल्मषाः छिन्नद्वैधायतात्मानः सर्वभूतहिते रताः कामक्रोधवियुक्तानां यतीनां यतचेतसाम् अभितो ब्रह्मनिर्वाणम् वर्तते विदितात्मनां स्पर्शान् कृत्वा बहिर्बाह्याम् चक्षुश्चैवान्तरे भ्रुवोः प्राणापानौ समौ कृत्वा नासाभ्यन्तरचारिणौ यतेन्द्रियमनो बुद्धिः मुनिर्मोक्षपरायणः विगतेच्छाभयक्रोधः यः सदा मुक्त एव सः भोक्तारं यज्ञतपसाम् सर्वलोकमहेश्वरम् सुहृदं सर्वभूतानां ज्ञात्वा मां शान्तिमृच्छति ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे कर्मसन्न्यासयोगो नाम पञ्चमोऽध्यायः।
Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. The fifth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is called Karma Sannyasa Yoga. In this fifth chapter, it starts with a question of Arjuna, and a question that seems awfully similar to one that he has asked in the beginning of the third chapter. His question is essentially, Shri Krishna, should I take to the path of action or to the path of knowledge? Which of course is coupled with renunciation. Arjuna has a strong preference to take up to the path of renunciation, not born out of detachment, but it is born out of a dvesha, dislike. He has a dislike for the particular action he has to engage in, and that is the action of fighting this fratricidal war. In the third chapter, when Arjuna asks this question, it is clear that Arjuna does not completely understand how the path of action is connected to his spiritual evolution. Shri Krishna has told him, Karmanyevadikaraste, that Arjuna, you should take up action. However, Arjuna thinks, Tat kim karmani ghore mam niyojyasi Keshava. O Keshava, why do you engage me in this horrid or terrible action, gore karmani. This indicates that Arjuna does not have a clear understanding of how the path of action is going to lead to his spiritual unfoldment. Thus, Sri Krishna gives the 3rd chapter discourse on Karma Yoga, explaining how the path of action leads to spiritual evolution through the purification of the mind. After that, in the 4th chapter, Sri Krishna then shows how this path of action finally turns into the path of knowledge. And through this path of knowledge, one then attains to the highest state of peace and moksha, liberation. In that, he shows sarva karma kilam partha jnane parisamapyate. All actions finally culminate in knowledge. And this knowledge, nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate, is most purifying. And through this purifying knowledge, jnanam labdva param shantim achirena digacchati, one attains supreme peace. However, in the very last verse and last statement of the 4th chapter, after glorifying knowledge, Sri Krishna then tells Arjuna, Hey Arjuna, yogam atishta uttishta bharata. Hey Bharata, you now take up to the path of action. Having glorified knowledge and even understood how the path of action leads to liberation, Arjuna is still confused. But here in the 5th chapter, with his question, Sannyasam karmanam Krishna punaryogam chashamsasi yat shreya etayor ekam tanme bruhi sunishchitam. Here in this question, Arjuna is a different and more educated person than the person he was when he asked the same question in chapter 3. Here he understands that a person can evolve and grow to the path of Karma Yoga, and a person can evolve and grow to the path of Jnana Yoga. And here that Jnana Yoga is called Sannyasa Yoga. However, Arjuna, in spite of having this understanding, he still has an inclination driven by his fear, driven by his dislikes, to take towards the path of sannyas and leave the war. Thus, in order to make it definitive, in order to make it very conclusive, for Arjuna, Sri Krishna gives a very clear answer. Tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate. Arjuna, for you better than sannyas is karma yoga. He makes it very clear. This statement in verse 2, we must understand, is very contextual. It is for the ears of Arjuna and Arjuna-like students. He has said Karma Yoga clearly excels Karma Sannyasa. Having made this statement, this doubt no longer rises in the mind of Arjuna from here on. However, Sri Krishna, in order to boost the enthusiasm of Arjuna and also clarify in his mind That these are not two divergent paths going in different directions. They are in fact the one path continuing to the one goal, but different stages of that one path. Thus, in the 3rd, 4th and 5th verses, Sri Krishna shows the similarities between Karma Yoga and Karma Sannyas. He says, Nyeyasa nitya sannyasi yo na dveshti na kankshati. For that person we are calling a sannyasi, renunciate. They are also giving up their strong likes and dislikes, just like the Karma Yogi is. And as they both, whether Karma Yogi or Sannyasa Jnana Yogi, as they journey on their path with commitment to their path, then both will attain the same destination. Yeah. Ekamapyastita samyaka ubayor vindate palam. They will both attain the same destination. Thus, this Jnana Yoga, which is also called Sankhya Yoga, which is also called Karma Yoga, Ekam Sankyam cha Yogam cha yap pashyati sapashyati. Wise people are those who essentially see this path of Karma Yoga and the path of renunciation and knowledge. They are one and the same. So Sri Krishna satisfies and placates Arjuna and also clarifies his understanding. These are not divergent paths, but they are the one path, that leads to the one goal of moksha, nishreyasa. Then the question is, why can't everyone just take to sannyas? And in the 6th verse, sannyasastu mahaboho dukkhamaptuma yogataha. For the person who takes up to sannyas too early, not yet prepared, they are ayogataha. They are not integrated. They have not purified their minds sufficiently, and there are still strong likes and dislikes. For such a person, renunciation, dukkhamaptum, it will lead to a lot of misery and pain. Thus, for that person who has not yet developed enough dispassion, detachment, vairagya, it is not advisable that they jump hastily into the path of sannyasa. Here, the sannyasa is referring to vividisha sannyasa. Vividisha sannyasa means vetum icha, a seeker who has the desire to know the truth and has more dispassion than the karma yogi, and thus is able to give up other pursuits and distractions to concentrate exclusively on the path of knowledge in order to gain moksha. So this person is not realized or enlightened, but they're a highly evolved seeker who has enough detachment to fully engage in the path of listening, shravanam, reflecting, mananam, and meditation, nididhyasanam. For the person who is still practicing karma yoga, they can get to this path. Yoga yukto munir brahma nachirenadi gacchati. For the person who's yoga yukta, has practiced karma yoga sincerely, wholeheartedly, with great commitment, they have purified their mind, purged their likes and dislikes, then for such muni, they are now contemplative people, Brahma nachirenadi gacchati. And the word here, Brahma, Bhagavan Sri Adi Shankaracharya takes it to be sannyasa. That the person who's purified their mind through karma yoga can attain this sannyasa, renunciation and devotion to the path of knowledge. Thus, Bhagavan has shown how, one, Arjuna, you must take to the path of karma yoga, but please understand this karma yoga leads to sannyasa, jnana yoga, which then leads to moksha, and that is now given in the 7th verse. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyaha sarvabhutatma bhutatma kurvannapi nalipyate. For that karma yogi purified his mind and is now vishuddhatma. Vijitendriyaha has got perfect control of his or her body, and Jitendriyaha has got mastery of the senses. Here this can indicate karma sannyasa, as described repeatedly in Sthita Prajna Lakshana, chapter 2. For such a person who has done karma yoga, who has now practiced sincerely the path of jnana yoga and renunciation, sarvabhutatma bhutatma, they can have the vision and realization of seeing their self in the self of all. This indicates complete realization, samyak darshan. And for such a person who is enlightened now, the jivan mukta, kurvan api nalipyate. They are not touched, tainted or stained even while acting. To elaborate on this state of enlightenment, thus verses 8 and 9, naiva kinchit karomi iti yukto manyeta tatvivita. That knower of the truth, even while acting, never feels I am doing. I, the Atma, pure consciousness, am never doing. Then who is doing? Indriyani indriyarteshu vartanta iti dharayan. Constantly the thought and contemplation in their head is that the sense organs are interacting with the sense objects. Thus, transaction is taking place. Thus, the highest knowledge and state of wisdom has been indicated in 8th and 9th verse. However, coming back to Arjuna's context, Shri Krishna brings it back to Karma Yoga in the 10th verse. Brahmanyadaya karmani sangam tyaktva karotiyaha lipyatena sapapena padmapatram ivambasa. Practice this Karma Yoga, dedicating all your actions to the Supreme, freed of all attachment, and thus you will not be contaminated or stained, just like the lotus leaf is not stained and contaminated by the mud that surrounds it. A beautiful analogy that is given there. Now in the 11th verse, the very result of phala of karma yoga is given. Kayena manasa buddhya kevalairidriyairapi yogina karma kurvanti sangam tyaktva atma shuddhaye. For one who has practiced sincerely this karma yoga, kevalaihi, exclusively dedicating all actions and results towards the higher. Ishwaraya na mama. It is for Lord, it is not for me. For such a person, what happens to them? Atma shuddhaye. They get Atma shuddhi, which means chitta shuddhi. Not purification of consciousness, that can never be purified. Nitya shuddhi it is. But Atma shuddhi means chitta shuddhi. So for that person who practices karma yoga, what is the result? Chitta shuddhi. Purification of the mind. And with such purity, yukta karma phalam tyaktva shantimapnoti naishtikim. When a person has such purity of mind, is able to let go of attachment to the results, karma phalam, then eventually shantimapnoti naishtikim. They will eventually attain that abiding, permanent peace and beatitude. And Bhagavan Bhashaka clarifies by saying that from this karma yoga, one gets purification of mind, sattva shuddhi. Then from sattva shuddhi, they attain knowledge, jnana prapti. Then from that jnana prapti, they let go of all other actions, duties, distractions, sarva karma, sannyasa. Then he said they abide in knowledge, jnana nishta. And thus they gain this naishtikim, shanti. Okay. Lord Sri Krishna also indicates for one who doesn't follow even the path of karma yoga, ayukta kamakarena phale sakto nibhadyate. For such a person driven by their own personal intense desires, they remain bound and attached. Now, having shown the path of, again just indicating karma yoga briefly, the result of karma yoga, now the Lord Sri Krishna again takes up to the path of knowledge and sannyasa. Sarva karmani manasa sannyasyaaste sukham vashi navadhware pure dehi naiva kurvan nakaryan. For such a person abiding in knowledge, then they as the self, as the Atma, as pure consciousness, navadhware pure dehi aste. They remain seated in this city of 9 gates. The city of 9 gates, the body. 7 gates in the top and 2 at the bottom, the holes. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 1 mouth. And then genital and anus. That makes up the 9-gated city. They remain sukham aste, happily abiding, seated as the self. They remain. And they are not doing anything. Naiva kurvan. Nor are they prompting others to do, nakaryan. Both doing and prompting others to do is exhausting, it is tiring, it is fatiguing. And as that jnana yogi remains abiding in this knowledge, then they neither do as the self. As pure conscious, they are not the doer. And nor are they the prompter of others to do. This then leads to the question, if the self is not doing, who is doing? Nakartritvam nakarmani lokasya srijati prabhuhu nakarma phala sanyogam subhavastu pravartate. Arjuna, this self, nakartritvam, it has no sense of doership. Nakarmani lokasya srijati prabhuhu. This Prabhu here indicates the self, the Atma. Why is he Prabhu? Lord. Lord of what? That 9-gated city, the body. He is the Swami of the body. This Lord of the body is not a doer, nakartritvam. Has no sense of doership, no sense of agency. This here is the essence of sannyas. This here, the essence of sannyas is to abide in the notion, I am not the doer. Naiva kinchit karomi. So here, What is the knowledge that is to be understood? This is the knowledge. Na kartrutvam, na karmani lokasya srajati prabhu, na karma phala sanyogam. He is not responsible for the results of actions coming towards the doer of the action. He is not responsible for any of these things. So no, he doesn't do. He's not the doer. He doesn't engage in action. And nor is he responsible for the results of actions. This higher self doesn't do any of this. Then how does all this take place? Swabhavastu pravartate. This entire world of action and result, karma, karma phala, it is all taking place because of swabhavaha. Swabhava means prakriti, maya. This power of Maya, the creative power of the Lord, this Maya Shakti, this is what is indicated as Swabhavaha. This Swabhava is only prompting everything. Yeah? And continuing on, Nadatte kaschatit papam na chaiva sukritam vibhuhu ajnanena vratam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. In fact, all that is taking place here is because jnanam. Jnanam can either mean atmic jnanam or it can mean pure consciousness itself. Is ajnanena avratam, is covered by ignorance. Knowledge is covered by ignorance. Consciousness is covered by the veil of ignorance. Thus all this is taking place. However, jnanena tutadajnanam yesham nashitam atmanaha tesham adityavat jnanam prakashayati tatparam. Although it is veiled by ignorance, it can be removed by knowledge. Knowledge can come and illumine. It can come and remove that ignorance. And when a person now takes to this knowledge and practices it sincerely, practicing it sincerely, each and every moment of their life, this thought of this knowledge that I am not the doer, it is Prakriti that is doing. I am not engaging in actions. I am not bringing forth and responsible for these results, but it is Prakriti, nature, that is taking place. This knowledge a person should abide in. And this jnana nishta is indicated in 17th verse. Tad buddhayas tadatmanaha tan nishta tat parayanaha. That a person should abide in this knowledge, that with their intellect fixed on it, tadatmanaha, with their self absorbed into it, tadnishta, sincerely adhering to it, tatparayanaha, taking it as the highest and most important goal in life, then to such a person the result of knowledge will come. And the next few verses, the result of knowledge is indicated. And what is that? Gacchantya punaravrittim. There is no punaravrittihi. There is no rebirth for such a person. And pandita samadarshinaha. For the person absorbed in knowledge, they see everything the same. They can see the one truth in the heart of all beings. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastini. Shunichaiva shvapake cha pandita samadarshinaha. Just like the person who sees the one gold in all ornaments, this person sees the one truth behind all names and forms. Ihaiva tarjita sargaho yesham samye stitep manaha. They conquer rebirth. And Brahmani te stitaha. They remain and abide in that Brahman, the truth, the infinite. Na prashyet priyam prapya, no dujet prapya cha priyam. They are not one who gets all of a sudden exhilarated when something wonderful happens, nor do they get disturbed when unpleasant things happen. Stira buddhi, they have equipoise, steadiness, what was indicated as stita prajna in the second chapter. Thus, they have these things. And Sukham Akshayam Ashnute. They attain extreme happiness and bliss. This is the Jnana Phalam. The result of Jnanam has been given. Now in the next two verses, 22 and 23, obstacle to Jnanam is given. And that obstacle to Jnanam is in the form of our attachment fascination with bhoga, sense objects. And in order to conquer these sense objects, Shaknoti haivaya sorum praksharira vimokshanat kama krodod bhavam begam sayukta sasuki naraha. That person who can conquer the impulse of kama, desire, krodha, anger, for such a person, sayukta sasuki naraha, they are extremely happy. So it is conquering that impulse. What Guruji would say, conquer the moment. That impulse of anger, the impulse of desire only lasts for a moment. And as sincere seekers, we're to conquer that moment. Thus, the obstacles to knowledge are given. And now the next three verses talk about the nature of the Jivan Mukta. The one who has attained to enlightenment, how do they live? Yonta sukontara ramaha tatantar jyotirhevayaha sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhuto digacchati sarvabhuta hiterataha abhito brahma nirvanam. For such a person, antar sukha, they have extreme joy within. Antararamaha, completely reveling within. And they are experiencing Brahma Nirvanam, Brahmananda. The bliss of the infinite. They come to enjoy each and every moment. And with their relations and transactions with the world, sarvabhuta hiterataha, reveling in the welfare of all beings, not having hatred towards anyone, not having vengeance towards anyone, and not having attachment towards anyone. In the welfare of all, they delight, they sport, and they revel. Experiencing this Brahma Nirvanam, Brahma bliss of the infinite all around. Abhito Brahma Nirvanam vartate viditatmavan. For such a person of knowledge, they experience this on all sides. Thus, with this verse, the 26th, the topic of the 5th chapter is actually concluded. The last three verses are called Sangati. They are connections now to actually the 6th chapter, which is the topic of Dhyana Yoga. And in the 27th and 28th verses, very briefly, the practices of Dhyanam is given. How to practice meditation is given very briefly. And in the last verse, the 29th, the object of meditation, called Dhyayam, that has been indicated. In this way, Bhagavan has beautifully carried Arjuna from Karma Yoga to Jnana Yoga to now Karma Sannyas, and is leading him towards the path of meditation, which is taken up in the following verse, the following chapter, chapter 6. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.